In this video, we are going to talk about creating pivot tables from a data model. Now that may seem strange because we've done a little bit of that in the 3 previous videos of this module. And we've mentioned how using a pivot table based off a data model is not much different to how we typically use a pivot table. Subtle differences such as the multiple tables, and the fact that we can't create calculated fields, but in the idea of rearranging our data, that's the same. But let's try and explore a little bit more here. So with this pivot table, you may have noticed that because I've got multiple tables, it's becoming a bit more awkward and I'm having to scroll up and down this fields list a lot. So something we can do in normal pivot tables as well, but we're probably more interested here because of the volume of our data, is to click the little gear icon in the top right, and instead of stacking the section and areas, we can put them side by side. And this creates a larger area for us to work with. I can now see nearly all of my fields at once and just drag them from left to right rather than top to bottom. So that's pretty cool. Okay, now let's change this pivot table round a bit. So I'm going to put the region into columns and maybe values into rows. And let's just move my pivot table fields pane over. And maybe I'll add another one of my measures. I'll remove count of sales and we'll bring in the total sales value and the gross profit. Now, other stuff we've seen in this course is we've spoken about slicers. It's probably fair to say that we're very fond of them. If I went up to Pivot Table Analyze, I could happily insert a slicer. Here's all of the tables from our data model again. And what do we want? Let's bring in something from the products table. Let's bring in the category. I'll click OK. Maybe adjust that to 2 columns, and we'll have a nice slicer above our pivot table here. Let's change its color and maybe insert some rows to create some space. So this is stuff that we've seen in other points in this course, but now seeing it off a data model just to prove that we can do this. But let's finish with something a little bit different, because something that we can't do in pivot tables is just start inserting columns in the middle of them. And it's not as flexible in terms of the borders that we apply and the colors, because pivot tables are very defined areas. You know, the grand total area, the row labels area, they're very defined. Now, something we can do from a data model is come up to Pivot Table Analyze, come into OLAP tools, and we can actually convert our pivot table to formulas. So by doing this, it's no longer going to be a pivot table. So you have to decide if you want this or not. But if I click on convert to formulas, pivot table disappears. We now have a bunch of formulas known as cube functions. I can see cube value in my formula bar right now. And because we have calculations or formulas, this will continue to work. Even if I use my slicer, look at this, it still is working. It is slicing my data, even though my pivot table has gone. And because they're now formula cells, I would have absolutely no problem inserting rows anywhere I want them. Maybe even putting one before the grand total. I can start assigning borders where I want them. I could select this final row here and just start putting some borders in, like some top bottom borders. And even the freedom just to delete that cell that says column labels, delete the one that says values, and turn these headers bold. Maybe give grand total a special different color. So this is just a quick fire demonstration of now the versatility. We have formulas, we can put them anywhere we want, label them anything we want, and we've broken out of the restrictions of pivot tables. But obviously at the same time, sometimes those restrictions can help us, and some of the functionality that we get with pivot tables we've now lost in going to a formula. But it's a very cool option that the data model provides and has allowed me to create this format of my report whilst continuing to function and be refreshable because it all connects to that data model.